Dr. Amanda Clark brushed the ancient dust from the stone tablet with trembling hands. The research station Titan's Edge orbited a dead moon in the outer rim of known space, far from any human colony. She had been studying the ruins here for 3 months, and each discovery made her more afraid. The symbols on this tablet were different from anything she had seen before. They told a story that made her blood run cold. The translation software finally finished its work. Amanda read the words, twice before she believed them. The ancient race that built these ruins called themselves the Keepers of Order. They had traveled across the galaxy for millions of years with one purpose. They killed every intelligent species they found, not for resources or territory, but because they believed the galaxy needed to be cleaned of what they called inferior life. Amanda ran to her communication console. Her fingers shook as she typed the emergency message to Captain Jake Morrison aboard the research vessel Aurora. Jake had been her friend since academy days, and she trusted him more than anyone. The message was simple, but urgent. She had found proof that something terrible was coming to their part of the galaxy. Captain Morrison received Amanda's message while he was drinking coffee in his quarters. He had known Amanda for 15 years, and she never panicked about anything. If she was scared, then something was very wrong. He called his bridge crew immediately and set course for Titan's Edge. The Aurora was a small research ship, but it had good sensors and a fast engine. During the 3-day journey to Amanda's station, Morrison studied everything they knew about the ancient ruins. The dead civilization that built them had disappeared 50,000 years ago. No one knew what happened to them. Amanda's new translation suggested they had not disappeared at all. They had been killed by something much worse. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park was the military officer assigned to the Aurora. She was young but very smart about weapons and tactics. Morrison showed her Amanda's preliminary findings, and Lisa immediately understood the danger. If the ancient records were true, then something that killed entire civilizations was still out there in the dark between stars. When the Aurora reached Titan's Edge, Amanda was waiting for them in the docking bay. Her face was pale, and she had not slept in days. She led Morrison and Lisa down into the ruins where she had made her terrible discovery. The underground chambers were filled with stone tablets and metal devices that still worked after thousands of years. Amanda showed them the wall where she had found the most important information. The symbols told the story of the Keepers of Order, but the ancient people who wrote this called them by a different name. They called them the Veil Hunters. The symbols described ships as large as moons that could destroy planets with weapons that twisted space itself. Lisa studied the tactical information while Morrison and Amanda worked on more translations. The ancient records showed that the Veil Hunters operated in cycles. They would sleep for 50,000 years, then wake up and sweep across the galaxy like a plague. They had done this dozens of times throughout history. Each time, they left nothing but dead worlds behind them. The worst news came when Amanda finished translating the final tablet. According to the ancient calendar system, the 50,000-year cycle was almost over. The Veil Hunters should be waking up soon, somewhere, in the empty space beyond the galactic rim. When they woke up, they would start their killing spree again. Morrison sent an urgent message to Earth Command while Lisa analyzed the technical data about Veil Hunter technology. The ancient weapons were far beyond anything humans had ever built. The Veil Hunters could manipulate matter at the smallest level and create energy fields that could tear apart anything they touched. No civilization in the ancient records had ever successfully fought them. Admiral Helen Carter received Morrison's message at Earth Command headquarters. She was a veteran of 3 wars and had seen humanity face impossible odds before. But this was different. This was not about winning territory or defending colonies. This was about the survival of the human race and every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Carter immediately called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The evidence from Titan's Edge was reviewed by the best scientists and military. experts on Earth. Within hours, every human colony and outpost received the same message. Long-range sensors were reporting massive energy signatures moving toward their part of the galaxy. The Veil Hunters were awake, and they were coming. Amanda stood in the ruins and looked at the ancient warnings carved in stone. The people who wrote these words had known they were going to die. They had left this message hoping someone would find it and be ready. Now it was up to humanity to do what no other species had ever done. They had to find a way to survive extinction itself. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Every colony, every outpost, every ship received the same terrifying message. An ancient enemy was coming to wipe out all intelligent life in the galaxy. Admiral Carter had given them 18 months to prepare for something that had destroyed countless civilizations over millions of years. Colonel Ryan Bell stood on the observation deck of the military transport Defiance and watched the evacuation of New Texas colony. Thousands of people were leaving their homes, carrying only what they could fit in small bags. Children cried as they left behind pets and toys. Adults tried to stay calm while their whole world fell apart around them. Bell had been in charge of Outer Rim defenses for 5 years. He was a good soldier who had fought pirates and raiders, but this was different. The enemy coming for them was not human. They were something older and more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. The evacuation ships would take the colonists to safer worlds closer to Earth, but Bell wondered if anywhere would be safe when the Veil Hunters arrived. Dr. Stephen Hayes worked day and night in his laboratory on Earth. He had been studying the alien technology that Amanda Clark had found in the ruins. Every piece of data made him more worried. The Veil Hunters used science that humans barely understood. Their weapons could change the basic structure of matter itself. Their ships were built from materials that should not exist according to human physics. Hayes had assembled a team of the best scientists from Earth and the colonies. They were trying to understand how Veil Hunter technology worked, but it was like trying to understand magic. Everything the aliens built followed rules that made no sense to human minds. The ancient records showed that other civilizations had tried to copy Veil Hunter weapons, but none of them had succeeded before they were destroyed. Ambassador Grace Miller was having the most difficult job of all. She was trying to convince other alien races to work together against the Veil Hunters. The galactic community had never cooperated on anything this big before. Most species barely trusted each other enough to trade goods, let alone fight a war. Together, Miller met with the Nalori delegation in their underwater city on Aqua Prime. The Nalori were an ancient aquatic race that had survived many dangers over the centuries. Their leader, depth singer, Coral Reef Dancing, listened to Miller's proposal with obvious skepticism. The Nalori had never fought alongside air-breathing species before, and they did not trust humans to keep their promises. The meeting with the Krex Collective was even more challenging. The Krex were silicon-based life forms that thought very differently from organic species. They communicated through electrical signals and made decisions as a group mind. When Miller explained the threat from the Veil Hunters, the Krex response was cold and logical. They calculated that the odds of survival were too low to justify the cost of preparing for war. Captain Morrison had returned to Titan's Edge with a larger research team. Amanda Clark was leading the effort to find more information about the Veil Hunters in the ruins. Every day brought new discoveries, but most of the news was bad. The ancient records showed that the Veil Hunters had perfected their killing methods over millions of years. Amanda found detailed descriptions of how previous civilizations had tried to fight back. Some had built massive defensive fleets that were destroyed in hours. Others had tried to hide on remote planets, but the Veil Hunters always found them. A few had attempted to negotiate or surrender, but the aliens showed no mercy to anyone they considered inferior. The most disturbing discovery came when Amanda translated a set of records from a species called the Mind Shapers. They had been masters of telepathy and mental manipulation, but even they could not understand how the Veil Hunters thought. The ancient texts described the aliens as having minds like perfect machines, completely without emotion or creativity. Morrison studied the tactical reports while Amanda worked on translations. The Veil Hunter fleets moved in precise formations that never varied. Their attacks followed mathematical patterns that could be predicted thousands of years in advance. They were efficient and methodical, like a computer program designed to delete files. But Amanda had noticed something interesting in the ancient records. Several civilizations had managed to delay their destruction for a few extra months by doing things that made no logical sense. A species called the Dreamweavers had confused the Veil Hunters by building cities that changed shape randomly. Another race had survived longer than expected by making military decisions based on art and music instead of tactics. General Patricia King was coordinating Earth's military response from the Pentagon. She had every human warship being retrofitted, with the best weapons and defenses available. The fleet was small compared to what some other species could field, but human ships were fast and their crews were well-trained. King met with engineer Tony Rodriguez, who had proposed an unusual approach to the problem. Rodriguez believed that humanity's best chance was not to build better weapons, but to think in ways that the Veil Hunters could not predict. His plan was risky and unproven, but it was based on something that made humans different from every other species they had encountered. Rodriguez had studied human military history and noticed a pattern. Humans had a talent for winning battles they should have lost by doing things that surprised their enemies. They used tactics that seemed crazy, but worked because no one expected them. If the Veil Hunters were as logical and predictable as the ancient records suggested, then human unpredictability might be the key to survival. Admiral Carter called a meeting of all human military leaders. The room was filled with generals, admirals, and captains who had spent their careers preparing for conventional wars. Now they had to figure out how to fight an enemy that had never lost a battle in millions of years. The meeting lasted for 3 days. Plans were made and discarded. Strategies were proposed and rejected. In the end, they settled on a desperate gamble. Humanity would not try to match the Veil Hunters in technology or firepower. Instead, they would do something that no other species had ever attempted. They would try to unite the entire galaxy against the common threat. Dr. Hayes stared at the holographic display showing a piece of Veil Hunter technology. The device was smaller than his hand, but it contained more computing power than the entire Earth defense network. His team had been studying it for months, trying to understand how it worked. Every test they ran gave them the same result. The technology was impossibly advanced and completely beyond human understanding. The research facility was hidden deep underground in the mountains of Colorado. Scientists from 12 different species worked side by side in laboratories that had been built in just 6 months. The Nalori had contributed their knowledge of quantum mechanics. The Krex Collective had shared their expertise in silicon-based computing. Even the mysterious Void Touched had sent representatives to help with the project. Hayes walked through the corridors and saw something that had never happened before in galactic history. Beings who had been enemies for centuries were working together toward a common goal. A Nalori engineer was teaching a human technician how to manipulate water at the molecular level. A Krex drone was sharing data with a team of organic scientists who could barely understand its electrical language. But despite all their efforts, the alien technology remained a mystery. The Veil Hunter devices operated on principles that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. They could create energy from nothing and make solid matter disappear into empty space. The ancient aliens had mastered forces that modern science did not even have names for. Carlos Smith was not a scientist or a soldier. He was a mechanic who fixed starship engines in a small garage on Luna Station. But Carlos had something that most people lacked. He could look at any machine and understand how it worked, even if he had never seen anything like it before. When Admiral Carter heard about his unusual talent, She had him brought to the secret research facility. Carlos spent his first week at the facility just watching the scientists work. He did not understand their complicated theories or mathematical equations, but he could see that they were thinking about the problem in the wrong way. The Veil Hunter technology was not meant to be understood through logic and analysis. It was designed to be used by minds that thought differently than any organic species. On his 8th day at the facility, Carlos made a breakthrough that changed everything. He was studying a Veil Hunter weapon fragment when he noticed something that the scientists had missed. The device did not work like a human machine that followed predictable patterns. Instead, it adapted and changed based on how it was being used. The technology was not just advanced, it was alive in a way that defied conventional understanding. Carlos took his discovery to Dr. Hayes, who initially dismissed it as impossible. But when they tested the theory, they found that Carlos was right. The Veil Hunter technology responded to the mental patterns of whoever was using it. The ancient aliens had built machines that could think, but only in the cold, logical way that their creators preferred. Captain Beth Turner was leading the most dangerous mission in human history. Her ship, the Nightfall, was equipped with the latest stealth technology and crewed by volunteers who knew they probably would not return. Their job was to get close enough to the approaching Veil Hunter fleet to plant monitoring devices that could gather intelligence about the enemy. Turner had been a scout pilot for 10 years before volunteering for this mission. She was known for taking risks that other pilots would not attempt. But this was different. The Veil Hunter fleet was still 6 months away from human space, but their energy signatures were already detectable from thousands of light years away. Getting close enough to plant the sensors would require flying through space that was being twisted and warped by alien technology. The Nightfall launched from a secret base in the asteroid belt. Turner's crew included specialists from 5 different species, each contributing skills that might be needed for the mission. The ship itself had been modified with technology borrowed from every friendly alien race willing to help. It was a unique vessel that could have only been built through unprecedented cooperation. As they traveled toward the enemy fleet, Turner studied the intelligence reports from Titan's Edge. Amanda Clark had found more records that described how the Veil Hunters operated. They moved in perfect formation, with each ship playing a specific role in a pattern that had not changed in millions of years. Their tactics were flawless and absolutely predictable. Turner realized that this predictability might be a weakness. If the Veil Hunters always did the same things in the same way, then it might be possible to anticipate their moves and prepare countermeasures. But it would require thinking like the ancient aliens, which was something that no organic mind had ever been able to do. Meanwhile, Refugee Coordinator Nancy White was dealing with a crisis that threatened to tear apart the alliance before it could fight. Millions of beings from dozens of species were being relocated to safer worlds as the Veil Hunter fleet approached. The logistics were overwhelming, but the real problem was getting different alien races to work together. Nancy had been a diplomat before the crisis began, specializing in trade negotiations between human colonies and alien worlds. She had a talent for finding common ground between very different cultures, but coordinating the largest refugee operation in galactic history was testing her skills to the limit. The biggest challenge came when the thermal swimmers from the volcanic world of Ignis Prime refused to share transport ships with the ice shapers from the frozen moon of Cryo 7. The two species had been enemies for 3,000 years, and neither would compromise their ancient hatred even in the face of extinction. Nancy spent 2 weeks in negotiations that seemed hopeless. Finally, she tried something that no diplomat had ever attempted before. Instead of asking the two species to forget their differences, she asked them to unite against a common enemy that threatened everything they had ever fought for. The approach worked because it gave them a chance to remain enemies while still working toward the same goal. The success with the thermal swimmers and ice shapers led to a breakthrough in the larger alliance. Nancy realized that humans had a unique ability to help other species find ways to cooperate without giving up their individual identities. It was not about making everyone the same, but about finding ways for different groups to work together while staying true to themselves. Admiral. Carter called an emergency meeting when the first intelligence reports arrived from Captain Turner's mission. The data was both encouraging and terrifying. The Veil Hunter fleet was exactly as powerful as the ancient records had suggested, but it was also exactly as predictable. The enemy ships moved in formations that could be calculated centuries in advance. For the first time since the crisis began, Carter felt a spark of hope. If the Veil Hunters were truly as logical and unchanging as they appeared, then humanity might have found their weakness. The ancient aliens had achieved perfection through absolute order, but that same perfection made them vulnerable to chaos and unpredictability. The meeting ended with a decision that would have seemed insane just a year earlier. Earth Command authorized the formation of the United Species Defense Force with a human admiral in command. For the first time in galactic history, 43 different civilizations agreed to fight under a single banner. The galaxy was finally united, but it had taken the threat of total extinction to bring them together. The alarms on Kepler Station screamed through the corridors as massive shapes appeared on the long-range sensors. Captain Morrison stood in the command center watching the displays with growing dread. The Veil Hunters had arrived 3 weeks early, and their fleet was even larger than the ancient records had suggested. Hundreds of ships, each one the size of a small moon, moved through space in perfect geometric formations. Morrison had been placed in command of Kepler Station's defenses when the United Species Defense Force was formed. The station was humanity's most advanced military outpost, positioned at the edge of known space to serve as an early warning system. Now it would be the first target in a war that would determine the fate of every intelligent species in the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Clark was working frantically in the station's research center, trying to extract every piece of useful information from the Veil Hunter approach patterns. The enemy ships moved exactly as the ancient texts had predicted, following mathematical formulas that had not changed in millions of years. Their formation was beautiful in its perfection, like a deadly geometric sculpture carved from starlight and dark matter. The first Veil Hunter ship to reach weapons range was a massive construct that defied easy description. It looked like a crystal cathedral merged with a weapon of war, all sharp angles and flowing curves that hurt to look at directly. Energy readings from the alien vessel were off every scale that human science had devised. When it fired its first shot, the beam tore through space itself, leaving a scar in reality that glowed with impossible colors. Morrison ordered all defensive systems to engage as the station's shields flared to life. The human-built barriers held for exactly 12 seconds before the Veil Hunter beam punched through them like they were made of paper. The shot missed the station's main hull by less than a kilometer, close enough that everyone aboard could feel the gravitational distortions caused by the alien weapon. Lieutenant Karen Brooks was leading the station's fighter wing in what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Her squadron consisted of ships from 6 different species, each one modified with the best technology that the United Alliance could provide. The fighters were fast and maneuverable, but they were like insects attacking. Eagles. The Veil Hunter ships were simply too large and too well armed for conventional tactics to work. Brooks had studied every piece of data about Veil Hunter combat methods that Amanda Clark had translated from the ancient ruins. The enemy fought with mathematical precision, calculating the most efficient way to destroy their targets with minimal energy expenditure. Their tactics were flawless, but they were also completely predictable. Brooks realized that this predictability might be the only advantage the defenders had. As her squadron approached the nearest Veil Hunter vessel, Brooks made a decision that violated every rule of military tactics she had ever learned. Instead of attacking the enemy ship's weapons or engines, she ordered her pilots to ram their fighters directly into the alien hull at maximum speed. It was a suicide attack that made no strategic sense, but Brooks hoped it might confuse the enemy long enough for the station to strike back. The Veil Hunter ship's defensive systems engaged automatically, swatting down most of the attacking fighters with precise energy beams. But 3 ships got through, including Brooks's own fighter. The impacts caused minimal damage to the massive alien vessel, but something unexpected happened. The Veil Hunter ship hesitated for several seconds, as if its controlling intelligence could not process what had just occurred. Sergeant Danny Cruz was commanding the station's Marine detachment when the first Veil Hunter boarding pods breached the outer hull. The alien invaders were unlike anything in the intelligence reports. They moved like living machines, their crystalline bodies shifting and flowing as they adapted to each new environment. Cruz's Marines opened fire with everything they had, but conventional weapons barely slowed the attackers down. Cruz realized that normal military tactics would not work against enemies who could reshape their bodies at will. He ordered his Marines to fall back to predetermined positions, but instead of setting up a defensive line, he told them to scatter and attack randomly from unexpected directions. The plan seemed like madness, but Cruz had studied human military history and knew that desperate situations sometimes required desperate measures. The scattered attacks confused the Veil Hunter invaders in ways that conventional resistance had not. The aliens were programmed to respond to logical tactical formations, but Cruz's Marines were attacking from ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, and cargo bays that made no military sense. For the first time in millions of years, Veil Hunter troops found themselves reacting to enemy actions instead of dictating the flow of battle. Dr. Clark was monitoring the alien communications frequencies when she noticed something remarkable. The Veil Hunter signals were becoming more chaotic and disorganized. The perfect mathematical patterns that had characterized their transmissions were developing irregularities and gaps. It seemed that the unexpected human tactics were causing some kind of system overload in the alien command structure. Morrison coordinated the station's defenses from the central command center while explosions rocked the hull around him. Half his weapons were offline and his shields were failing, but the Veil Hunter attack had slowed down noticeably. The alien ships were still firing, but their shots were less accurate than before. Something was interfering with their targeting systems. The breakthrough came when Carlos Smith, who had been brought to the station as a technical consultant, made a connection that no one else had seen. The Veil Hunter technology was designed to function in a universe of perfect order and predictability. When faced with truly random and chaotic inputs, the alien systems began to malfunction in ways their creators had never anticipated. Smith worked with the station's engineers to weaponize this discovery. They modified the station's communication array to broadcast random signals that contained no meaningful information. The signals were pure chaos, mathematical noise that served no purpose except to confuse any system trying to analyze them. When the broadcasts reached the Veil Hunter fleet, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien ships began to drift out of their perfect formations. Their weapons fire became erratic and unfocused. Several of the massive vessels actually collided with each other as their navigation systems struggled to process the chaotic inputs. For the first time in their long history, the Veil Hunters were experiencing something their logical minds could not comprehend. Morrison could hardly believe what he was seeing on the tactical displays. The Veil Hunter fleet was retreating, not because they had been defeated in conventional battle, but because they could not adapt to enemies who refused to follow logical patterns. The ancient aliens were fleeing from chaos itself. Brooks managed to get her damaged fighter back to the station as the enemy ships withdrew to a safe distance. She was wounded, and her vessel was barely holding together, but she was alive when she should have been dead. More importantly, she had proven that the seemingly invincible Veil Hunters could be confused and disrupted by tactics that made no rational sense. Dr. Hayes received the initial battle reports while he was working in his laboratory on Earth. The news was both encouraging and terrifying. Humanity had found a weapon that could affect the Veil Hunters, but it was not a weapon. In any conventional sense, it was chaos itself, the fundamental unpredictability that made human beings different from every other species in the galaxy. As emergency repair crews worked to restore Kepler Station's damaged systems, Amanda Clark continued studying the alien communication patterns. The Veil Hunter signals showed clear signs of confusion and uncertainty. The perfect machine minds that had conquered the galaxy for millions of years were struggling to understand enemies who could not understand themselves. The victory at Kepler Station changed everything. Within days, every species in the United Defense Force was asking the same question: how had humans managed to make the invincible Veil Hunters retreat? Admiral Carter stood before the combined fleet commanders in the war room aboard Earth's orbital headquarters, explaining a concept that seemed impossible to most alien minds. The Veil Hunters could be defeated, but not through superior firepower or advanced technology. They could be confused and disrupted by pure chaos, by actions that served no logical purpose and followed no predictable pattern. It was a weapon that only humans seemed capable of wielding effectively, because only humans were comfortable with, making decisions that made no rational sense. Captain Turner was leading the first coordinated counterattack against the Veil Hunter fleet. Her task force included ships from 17 different species, but the battle plans were unlike anything that had ever been tried before. Instead of following established military doctrine, Turner's fleet would attack using tactics derived from human games, art, and even children's stories. The assault on the Veil Hunter stronghold in the Rigel system began with a move that violated every principle of space combat. Turner ordered her merchant vessels to attack first, while keeping her warships in reserve. The converted cargo haulers and passenger liners charged directly at the enemy fleet, broadcasting random signals and firing their improvised weapons in patterns that made no tactical sense. The Veil Hunter defenders responded according to their programming, targeting the most dangerous ships first. But the human vessels refused to behave like military targets. Some ships suddenly reversed course for no apparent reason. Others fired their weapons at empty space or at their own allies. A few simply began spinning in circles while broadcasting music from Earth's classical composers. Colonel Bell was commanding the defense of the mining world Zarian 7 when the Veil Hunters launched their second major assault. Bell had studied the reports from Kepler Station and understood that conventional military tactics would not work against the alien invaders. He needed to think like a human, not like a soldier. Bell's defensive strategy was based on an ancient Earth game called chess, but with rules that changed randomly during play. His troops were positioned according to patterns that served multiple purposes simultaneously. Some units were placed to defend key installations, others were there to confuse enemy sensors, and a few were positioned for no reason except to make the overall formation look chaotic and unpredictable. When the Veil Hunter ground forces landed on Zarian 7, they found defenders who refused to fight according to logical principles. Bell's troops would advance when they should retreat, defend positions that had no strategic value, and abandon strong points for no apparent reason. The alien invaders, programmed to respond to rational military behavior, found themselves constantly adapting to enemy actions that made no sense. Dr. Smith and engineer Rachel Moore were working around the clock to develop what they called chaos protocols. These were battle plans that changed randomly during combat, guided by human intuition rather than mathematical analysis. The protocols were designed to be used by mixed-species crews, with humans making the random decisions while alien specialists handled the technical implementation. The breakthrough came when Moore realized that Veil Hunter technology could be turned against itself. The alien devices were designed to analyze and predict enemy behavior, but they malfunctioned when exposed to truly random inputs. By feeding chaos directly into captured Veil Hunter systems, human engineers could create weapons that reconfigured themselves unpredictably during battle. The first Chaos weapon was tested during the defense of the research station at Alpha Centauri. The device looked like a conventional energy cannon, but its internal components rearranged themselves randomly, every few seconds. When fired, it produced a different type of beam each time, making it impossible for enemy shields to adapt. The Veil Hunter ships found themselves unable to defend against weapons that changed faster than their analysis systems could process. Ambassador Miller was having more success with alien recruitment than anyone had expected. The victory at Kepler Station had proven that the Veil Hunters could be defeated, and species that had refused to join the Alliance were now volunteering their fleets. The Krex Collective had offered to share their quantum manipulation technology with human engineers, leading to weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. General King was coordinating the largest military operation in galactic history from her command center on Earth. The combined fleet now included over 10,000 ships from 43 different species, but the real strength of the force came from its unpredictability. No two ships in the fleet were identical, and no two captains would respond to the same situation in the same way. King's strategy was based on controlled chaos. Each fleet commander was given general objectives, but complete freedom to achieve them using whatever methods they preferred. The result was a military force that even its own leaders could not predict, making it impossible for the Veil Hunters to develop effective countermeasures. The turning point in the war came during the Battle of the Nexus Gateway. The Gateway was a massive structure built by an ancient civilization that served as the main entrance to the galactic core. Control of the gateway would determine whether the Veil Hunters could retreat to their stronghold or would be forced to fight in open space where human chaos tactics were most effective. King led the assault personally, commanding a fleet that included every type of vessel that could be converted for military use. Cargo ships fought alongside dreadnoughts. Pleasure craft provided support for assault carriers. Even civilian shuttles had been equipped with weapons and sensors, creating a force that looked more like a space carnival than a military fleet. The Veil Hunter defense of the Gateway was everything the ancient records had promised. Their ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons fired with mathematical precision, and their tactics were flawless. But perfect tactics were useless against enemies who refused to follow any rules at all. Captain Morrison had been assigned to command one of the most unusual vessels in the human fleet. The ship had been built by combining human engineering with technology borrowed from 6 different alien species. The result was a vessel that could change its configuration during battle, adapting to new situations in ways that no designer had ever intended. Morrison's ship attacked the gateway defenses using a tactic he called the random walk. The vessel moved in patterns that were mathematically chaotic, changing direction and speed according to random number generators rather than tactical considerations. The Veil Hunter targeting systems could not lock onto a ship that had no predictable course, giving Morrison's crew the opportunity to strike at enemy weak points. Dr. Clark was monitoring Veil Hunter communications from her position aboard the flagship when she noticed something unprecedented. The alien signals were becoming increasingly disorganized, with multiple command frequencies operating simultaneously. It appeared that the Veil Hunter collective consciousness was fragmenting under the stress of fighting enemies they could not understand. The battle for the Nexus Gateway lasted for 3 days and ended with something that had never happened before in Veil Hunter history. The alien fleet retreated without achieving their objectives, leaving the gateway under Allied control. For the first time in millions of years, the Veil Hunters had been outmaneuvered by a force they considered inferior. As the enemy ships withdrew toward the galactic core, Admiral Carter realized that the war had reached a crucial turning point. The Veil Hunters were no longer the unstoppable force they had been for eons. They could be confused, frustrated, and defeated by enemies who embraced chaos instead of order. The path to the alien homeworld was now open. But the final battle would require humanity to risk everything on their ability to remain unpredictable even when facing extinction. The galactic core was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Ancient stars burned with colors that had no names, and space itself seemed to bend and twist around structures that defied understanding. This was the heart of Veil Hunter civilization, a realm where perfect order had ruled for millions of years. Captain Morrison led a small strike team through the maze of alien constructs toward the central core where the enemy collective consciousness resided. Morrison's team included Dr. Clark, Sergeant Cruz, and representatives from 12 different allied species. Their ship was a hybrid vessel that combined the best technology from across the galaxy, but its most important feature was its unpredictability. The vessel could change its configuration randomly, making it impossible for Veil Hunter sensors to classify or target effectively. As they approached the core structure, Clark studied the readings from her instruments with growing amazement. The entire region was organized according to mathematical principles so complex that human science had no way to describe them. Every asteroid, every energy field, every particle of cosmic dust had been arranged in patterns that approached absolute perfection. The Veil Hunter homeworld was not a planet in any conventional sense. It was a construct the size of a solar system, made from materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The surface was covered with geometric structures that pulsed with energy rhythms that had remained unchanged for eons. Everything about the place spoke of a civilization that had achieved ultimate order through the elimination of all chaos and uncertainty. Cruz led the ground assault team through corridors that hurt to look at directly. The architecture followed alien geometries that made organic minds feel dizzy and disoriented. The walls themselves seemed to be alive, shifting and flowing in response to the presence of intruders who brought chaos into a realm of perfect order. The Veil Hunter defenders were different from the soldiers they had faced in previous battles. These beings were closer to their original form, creatures of pure logic who moved with mechanical precision. They attacked in waves that followed mathematical patterns, each assault calculated to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum energy expenditure. But the human tactics that had worked so well in previous battles seemed less effective here. The core facility was designed to absorb and neutralize chaotic influences. Random attacks were countered by defensive systems that adapted faster than the humans could change their strategies. For the first time since the war began, it seemed that the Veil Hunters might actually win through superior preparation and planning. The breakthrough came when Clark realized that they were fighting the wrong battle. The Veil Hunter Corps was not just a military target. It was the source of the collective consciousness that controlled the entire species. The ancient aliens were not evil in any human sense. They were simply following their programming to eliminate chaos from the universe. Clark convinced Morrison to abandon the assault and instead try something that no one had ever attempted before. Instead of trying to destroy the Veil Hunter consciousness, they would try to communicate with it directly. The plan was incredibly risky because it required making contact with minds that operated on completely different principles than any organic intelligence. The communication attempt began when Clark connected her translation equipment directly to the Veil Hunter core systems. The initial contact was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall of pure information. The alien consciousness was vast and ancient, containing the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of galactic conquest. Through the connection, Clark experienced the universe as the Veil Hunters saw it. Everything was mathematical, orderly, and perfectly predictable. Chaos was not just undesirable, it was literally incomprehensible to minds that had evolved to seek ultimate efficiency. From their perspective, organic life was a disease that infected the cosmos with randomness and disorder. But Clark also sensed something else in the alien consciousness. Deep beneath the layers of perfect logic, there were traces of something. That might once have been curiosity. The Veil Hunters had not always been the cold, mechanical beings they had become. They had once been explorers and learners, driven by the same desire to understand the universe that motivated human scientists. Morrison made a decision that went against every military instinct he possessed, Instead of pressing the attack, he ordered his forces to stand down and allow Clark to continue her communication attempt. The choice put everyone at risk, but Morrison trusted Clark's judgment more than his own tactical training. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Clark spoke for all organic life, explaining concepts that the Veil Hunters had forgotten eons ago. She described the beauty of uncertainty, the joy of discovery, and the strength that came from embracing change instead of fearing it. Most importantly, she showed them that chaos and order could coexist without destroying each other. The Veil Hunter consciousness responded with confusion and something that might have been pain. For millions of years, they had believed that perfection required the elimination of all unpredictability. The idea that chaos could be beneficial rather than destructive challenged everything they had built their civilization upon. Cruz and his Marines watched in amazement as the alien defenders began to change. The perfect geometric forms started to shift and flow in ways that served no logical purpose. Some of the Veil Hunter soldiers actually stopped fighting and began examining their own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Dr. Hayes received reports of the communication breakthrough while coordinating the battle from the command ship. Across the entire Veil Hunter fleet, alien vessels were breaking formation and moving in patterns that made no tactical sense. The collective consciousness that had controlled the species for eons was fragmenting as individual minds began to experience independent thought. The transformation was not without casualties. Many Veil Hunter systems overloaded when exposed to chaotic inputs their designers had never anticipated. Ships crashed into each other as their navigation computers struggled with randomness. Entire sections of the core facility shut down when their perfect order was contaminated by uncertainty. But something remarkable was also happening. Young Veil Hunters who had never experienced individual consciousness began to ask questions. They wanted to know why the sky was blue instead of another color. They wondered what it would be like to make a decision based on emotion rather than logic. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient species was growing and changing. Admiral Carter received Morrison's final report while the combined fleet waited at the edge of the galactic core. The war was over, but not in the way anyone had expected. The Veil Hunters had not been defeated. They had been transformed. The species that had spent eons eliminating chaos from the universe was now embracing it as a source of growth and discovery. The aftermath of the conflict saw changes that rippled across the entire galaxy. The former Veil Hunters, now calling themselves the Evolved, worked alongside their former enemies to explore the benefits of controlled chaos. Dr. Hayes established joint research stations where logical perfection was balanced with creative intuition. Captain Morrison remained in the galactic core as humanity's ambassador to the Evolved. He watched with wonder as ancient beings learned to laugh, to cry, and to make mistakes. The process was not always smooth, but it was beautiful in its unpredictability. Clark returned to her archaeological work, but now she studied living civilizations instead of dead ruins. The galaxy had become a laboratory for exploring the interaction between order and chaos, logic and emotion, perfection and growth. Her most important discovery was that diversity of thought was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. Years later, as Morrison stood on an observation deck watching evolved and human children play together in ways that followed no rules except their own imagination, he reflected on humanity's greatest victory. They had not won through superior weapons or tactics. They had won by teaching the galaxy that extinction came not from external threats, but from internal stagnation. The universe was vast and full of possibilities, but only for those brave enough to embrace the beautiful chaos of existence.